We will now convene a public hearing to receive public testimony concerning the composition of potential trustee voting areas associated with the district's transition to a by-trustee area election system in advance of the preparation of draft trustee voting area plans by the district's demographer. Under California Elections Code Section 10010, the board must hold at least 2 public hearings over a period of no more than 30 days, at which the public is invited to provide input regarding the composition of the district before drawing draft maps of the proposed boundaries of the district. We are going to have a presentation by our legal firm and our demographer as part of setting the stage for this hearing. Members of the public may submit comments on the establishment of voting area boundaries for the new trustee voting areas that will be established as part of the district's transition from an at-large system to a by-trustee area election system. After the close of the presentation, speakers will be given 3 minutes to make comments on this matter and this matter only. So if you would like to prepare a card so that you can participate in the hearing portion, you can do that now during the presentation.
Good evening, President Connolly, trustees, Dr. McLaughlin, staff, and the community. I'm Jonathan Salt, and our firm is assisting the district, along with the demographic firm of Cooperative Strategies, on its transition from at-large to by-trustee area elections. The district has completed the first step thus far, which is pass a resolution in stating its intention to transition from at-large to by-trustee area elections, and now we are in step 2, which is the second of 2 what I call pre-map public hearings, which is for members of the community and the board to provide feedback before any draft map is drawn of what they'd like to see and provide input on what communities should or shouldn't be together or what boundaries make sense within the district. One key thing to keep in mind here is that all the trustee areas need to have equal population based on the 2010 census, and that's total population. So at 135,000 or so people, it's about 27,000 people per trustee area. Digging a little bit deeper, based on citizen voting age population, which is a rolling estimate conducted by the Census Bureau. Based on a variety of factors, the district has approximately 11.8% Hispanic or Latino citizen voting age population, which is essentially you're above 18 and you are a citizen and eligible to vote. Approximately 78% Caucasian, approximately 1% African American, and approximately 7.3% Asian population. So with that in mind, I'm just going to go through a few different maps of some of the things that are to be considered in how we draw these draft maps into 5 different trustee areas. So this is an overall topographical view of the district with all the school sites on it. And as you can tell, in certain areas, there are different topographical features. For example, down in the Westlake area, it's not exactly a straight shot to the 101 towards the 23, for example. There's mountain ranges and valleys and et cetera around the district. So while it may look close on a map, it doesn't necessarily mean that it should be part of the same trustee area necessarily. This is the kind of feedback we're looking for today. Similarly, as I mentioned, each area needs to be about 27,000 people per trustee area. And by the way, all of these maps are available on the district website for closer examination. So this map, for example, if we zoom in on a high population area, each of these numbers represents a census block and the number of people in that census block. So you can look at the Newbury Park area and see that there is a high concentration of population. So likely there's going to draw towards pulling a trustee area in that direction, for example, versus in the sort of south central portion of the district where there are fewer folks, for example, 9, 5, 13. So while there may be folks here, it's not going to be a center of a district. They're likely going to be pulled into a different population area. This map, the red doesn't mean anything other than just amount of people. So this is what we call the population heat map. This shows where the densest population of members of the community live. So as you can see in the Newbury Park area and then up through the center of the district, that's where most people are concentrated. And so a lot of the trustee areas will be split through those areas. most likely. This map represents the census blocks that have 15% or higher Hispanic population. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are large areas, however. For example, down here, there are only 9 and 27 total people in that area, even though those two areas happen to have 15% or larger Hispanic population. Whereas in the north central portion of the district, as you can tell, there's a lot more population here. I'm not sure if you can see this, but there's several hundred in many of the census blocks in these areas. So they'll tend to have a higher concentration of Hispanic voters in that area. Similarly, along the 101 at the 23 intersection, again, you have larger populations, and those populations have a higher concentration of Hispanic members of the community. This map also shows the Asian population of the community. Same idea, 15% or higher per census block. And as we mentioned, there are some areas at the very, very top of this thing. You'll see there are 2 people who live in that area. It's a large purple area, but there are only 2 people there. Versus a little bit closer to Sycamore Canyon, there are higher percentages or higher numbers of people. So therefore, it's a little bit more densely populated with the Asian community. Similarly, just as an example, along the 101, again, not quite 2, but not quite 4,000, but there's 769, 119. These are more densely populated areas. And so in theory, if a map was drawn around this portion of the map, you would see an increase in the influence of the Asian population on the electorate. I kind of went in reverse order here, but just to go back on what exactly it is that we were looking for and what we're required to do in drawing these maps. You have to use the 2010 census population as well as other updated permissible data like the rolling CVAP data. Each area must be equal as practicable for people, but you can have up to a 10% variation between the largest and smallest area. You have to comply with the U.S. Constitution and California Constitution. The districts have to be geographically contiguous, so you can't start on one side, get to a certain number, stop, and then restart that same trustee area elsewhere. They have to be continuous, geographically as compact as possible. And then when we look at communities of interest, that's really the input we're looking for from everybody here tonight. It's what communities or neighborhoods should or shouldn't be in the same area and why. What would be a good way to split up an area if there's a high concentration of people. And finally, we cannot favor or discriminate against an incumbent political candidate or political party. Final thoughts, this doesn't change the district's overall boundaries, doesn't change where you attend school. Each board member owes a fiduciary duty to the entire district, not just the folks in the area they would represent. So it's still one board and one goal with common challenges. Upcoming schedule, after tonight's pre-map public hearing, probably over winter break, the demographer, based on this feedback from the community and the board, will draw draft maps, and they'll probably be released early January. And thereafter, there'll be 3 more public hearings where folks can come up and comment on what they like or don't like about certain maps or any suggested changes. And then the board ultimately on February 19th, in theory, will vote on a map that will be the district's map.
Thank you. Do we have public comment cards? Thank you. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 public comment cards. Each person will have 3 minutes, and the first person up is John Cummings, followed by Mary Ann Van Zyl. That's great. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Apart from saying congratulations to the new board members and to Dr. Connolly, and to let you know that there are a lot of very full hearts in this room and across the community, I'm giving the rest of my time to my personal hero of 2018, Mary Ann Van Zyl.
Okay, so you have like 2 more weeks where you can say any stuff like that, and then you have to stop. My name is Mary Ann Van Zyl. I am a citizen in the Conejo Valley Unified School District. I still have a student here, and I'm also a GIS analyst for the City of Thousand Oaks, so I bring some professional knowledge to this. which doesn't necessarily help make me a better line drawer. I actually have very little interest in where the lines are drawn, except for providing the remedy that is required, which is providing groups that have a constitutional protection because they are generally underrepresented groups, and getting more of a voice in how we run the school district. So that's my only concern. But I know that there are plenty of us in the community who are very interested in taking a look at the data. I'm just shocked when I say that I'm a data geek and everybody says, oh, me too, me too, me too. So we would all like to look at the data. And while it's very nice to see these maps, it doesn't help us. These maps don't help us think about where we would draw the lines, because I don't think these are the maps that the demographers are using. What the demographers are using are maps that are not static, that actually calculate when you draw lines, and you can, they do the math for you. And so what we've received so far is not so helpful. So again, I'm going to request, if it's at all possible, for the demographer to make available in a web format the data that they are using. And I understand that census block data is generally restricted and not available to the public, but census block group data is, and that could provide us with a good deal of help. In particular, with regard to these maps, when you show a percentage, you have this problem like we see with the big dark red group in Hidden Valley. And it's actually nice to get a sense of the neighborhoods, 15% above the average. That gives a good sense of the neighborhood. But without having any kind of a gradation, what about the groups that are 14% but highly densely populated, that might represent a large number of a protected group? And groups that are, for instance, 60% of a protected class that you really might want to center a district on. And so we can't see that using this data. So if you continue to give us percentage data, perhaps there could be some sort of gradation. In addition to 15% above average, you might want to say 10%, 20%, 30%, 40% in some sort of graded color scheme so that we could see. It would also be very nice to have numbers available, at least at the census block level, because, one of the areas that Mr. Dunn mentioned last week was the apartment complex that's at the corner of Hampshire and Triunfo, where it's very densely populated. But apparently, based on this, they don't quite reach the 15% threshold, but there may be a large voting block of Hispanics that you might want to include because it's a dense population. My main request in, pointing all of this out is that we would love to have data that we can work with, so that we can draw lines, and that when you draw lines, we can actually see, well, does this include all of the neighborhoods that we think should be included? And how much does it create the type of representation that the demand letter sought? And with the data that we're receiving now in PDFs, you can't really zoom in on, you can't see the numbers, and is this, there's a heat map, but if I were to draw the line, how many people are actually in the district? It would be really nice if we had some of that data so that we could participate more fully in this decision. Thank you.
Thank you. So, to our demographer in residence, could you come up to the microphone? Thank you.
Of course.
Those of you who attend these meetings know that when we're not in a hearing, this kind of a cross conversation can't occur. But in a hearing, we have flexibility that we don't have, and I think we should take advantage of it here. So I think we said last time that our professional experts were going to find this an engaged community. So here you are. And I'm going to ask on Mrs. Van Zyle's behalf, what are the possibilities going forward, like perhaps as a pre-meeting to the next hearing? Is there an opportunity for a look at, I don't even know the right term, non-static maps in a group setting? Is that something that we might be able to provide as a discussion session for the board and include the public rather than another bit in a meeting like this?
Sure. And just for the record, my name is Andrew Chittapong from Cooperative Strategies. So this is census data, so we are provided this data in an Excel format. So it is possible to kind of send an Excel sheet to maybe post on the website. But we also create tables as well when we do draw the boundary lines that show the equal population within each trustee area.
If the board would prefer, perhaps there could be potentially scheduled, we could talk about this offline, some sort of a community meeting or something where the demographer could be here with a map and folks can ask questions or something like that.
I know this isn't the time for board members to, since we're still within the hearing period. So if board members have input, we'll save that for the end of the hearing. We just have 2 more cards if you just want to hang on. So we'll follow up on that once we're out of the hearing phase. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have 2 more public speakers. Maybe Edith Tayson and then Claudia Vallejo.
Might be short for this, but hi guys. I just want to say that this is my first time at a school board meeting and I'm very excited to be here. Welcome to the new board executives. Hi. I know some of you guys since I went canvassing for you guys. So my name is Ida Tayson. I am 17 years old and I am currently a student at Thousand Oaks High School. 11 years ago, I moved here to Thousand Oaks from Reseda, and if none of you guys know where that is, let's just say that Thousand Oaks is a very different place. Here in Thousand Oaks, we have things that Camp Bloomfield, that's one of the major things that I think if you look back in Reseda, we don't have, and unfortunately, through the fires, it got destroyed. But here in Thousand Oaks, the streets are not perfect, but they're clean. We have clean parks, beautiful libraries, trees, and sometimes you live here for so long you forget the little things that make Thousand Oaks so great. So what I'm here to talk about today is about the mapping, and I'm here to say that I am a Latino student and who is English profession, and thank you to my parents, I am here today. And I want to say that moving to the next steps, I'm hoping that there would be Latino representatives. And I'm not only speaking for me, but hopefully for other races, there would be representatives from themselves as well, because I think that is so important. And that is my message for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Claudia Vallejo, and I'd like to talk about the same, about the mapping. And I'm also a student at Thousand Oaks High School. I am a senior, and I'm also a Latino student. And it's been brought to our attention that we need more representation for the minority groups to have a voice in our community. And as my friend mentioned, Thousand Oaks is a beautiful place, and we've seen this over the past few weeks due to the shootings and the fires. And we would just like to ask for more representation in our community. Over the past few years, and especially these few months, I've seen racial discrimination, and I'm very sad to talk about this, but we need to bring it up. That's why we are asking for Latino representation and minority representation. So thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for your comments. The public hearing receiving public testimony concerning the composition of potential trustee voting areas is now closed. And now we can take board comments and questions. Mrs. Everett, are you getting ready to?
Yeah. I was going to let someone else go. So as to the question of providing the maps and giving all the demographics to community members, and I suppose they would like to present you with maps that they feel would include the right populations, but we also need to understand that especially the woman that offers a lot of input is very political, running campaigns and helping 3 of the board members get elected in a very large way. So I would like to caution you as to, even though there may not be a adequate representation of the community if we hold a meeting, that this community is very diverse with a lot of worldviews, a lot of differences. And although some on the board will have very common views, that the community is not reflective of the community. It's very diverse. And we just want to make sure that if we're handing out maps and drawing up, allowing community members to draw up boundaries, even if they work in this field or whatever, that we need to ensure that it's taken in the right light, because I think it would, I don't know where everybody lives. I know where I live. I think I know where Betsy lives. I don't know exactly where you live, but I know the neighborhood. But I don't know where everyone lives, but other people do. And I think it's important that we ensure that is more not a part of the drawing up of the maps. So I also strongly believe that there are populations in our community that would like more representation, to really have that focus. I saw, actually, it was my neighborhood that had a dense population of Asian. It looked like an Asian population out in Sycamore out in Dos Vientos. So I strongly welcome that. I want people to feel like they're going to get a voice, but I also we just came off a political campaign, and everyone is still very involved in that, and those might be the same people that show up at the meetings to give you input, other than the minority populations that, of course, are there to ensure that their populations are represented.
Mrs. Fitzgerald.
So in looking at your slides, it does appear that it would be a violation of Article 21 of our state constitution for our maps to discriminate against an incumbent political candidate or political party or favor one. Is that correct?
Correct. So what that means, if you put it in layman's terms, if 2 of you live next door to each other, and let's say there were 4 board members that really didn't like one of those board members, they could, really wanted to keep one of the board members, splitting right down the middle of a street so that 2 folks who live next to each other probably isn't going to happen. That would probably violate the Constitution. More likely than not, if you live really, really, really close to each other and there's not a dense population between, you may end up in the same area. So I hope that answers the question.
It does. Have you dealt in other districts with this issue coming up where you've got concerns from community members with the lines being drawn to favor certain incumbents or political parties?
There are sometimes questions. I know that when the demographer does draw draft maps and publishes them, they'll present on how and why it is the way that it is, and then also take feedback of, oh, I didn't realize that if you move over one more street, that'll make that whole community whole. You all know the community better than we do. And so oftentimes there's more feedback after there's a draft map released. But of course, there's times where someone says, well, why is it this way? But maybe there is a major road that splits two relatively close residing trustees.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Goldberg?
So first, I'd like to say I loved that the students are engaged in this map drawing. That's fantastic. I am so happy that on our first meeting that the students came to speak to that, because it is about the students and representing the students. So I really liked the idea of the potential public forum so that we can ask all these questions, because not everybody is clued in to come to the school board meeting and ask the demographers. But if we publicize it well enough, you're not going to just get one or two data analysts. You're going to get a very, very engaged community, which I happen to love. And when I say very engaged, you may nod your head and go, yeah, we're engaged, but this is Thousand Oaks. So we are very engaged. And the numbers of density are the numbers of density. So drawing them so it makes sense to the community is a great idea. And you can't really fudge that. So I don't know how, you're going to craft areas that don't meet that number. So that's it.
I don't see any other comments. I guess as a point of clarification for the board, we're not going to meet again until January, and we have a scheduled meeting on the books for that, and here we go, and that is January 22nd. And if I understand the process correctly, our proposed maps will be brought to that meeting. That is correct?
They'll actually be published online on the website well in advance of the meeting, so that folks who can't come to a board meeting can comment, or on social media they'll be linked so that folks can find it if they can't come to a meeting. But yes.
And that will be 3 maps?
Somewhere around 3.
Around 3?
Yeah.
At least 2 and not more than?
We usually recommend 3 to 4 as a sweet
something
spot.
in that range. And so once those maps are prepared, you will provide them to the district, and we'll post them online for review. So let's talk a little bit about what that meeting on the 22nd might look like. If the board is interested in being able to consider tweaking the proposed one or more of the proposed maps by having a live version rather than a static version, what would that look like? Like, would that be something where we could meet in a room like this, and we could have a display up here, or would it need to? How long do you think a conversation like that would take? Give us an idea how you think that might work.
It very much depends. Once the maps are up online and community members are commenting and board members are reviewing it, at a public hearing like this, for example, if a handful of people stood up and said, I'm just going to use this as just an example. There's no maps drawn yet, but let's just say the Newberry Park area. Let's say there ends up being a trustee area around here. but then there's a division because the population gets to 27,000, and then you move on to the next area. There might be comments from the community or the board that says, I really like that, but what if we try and move the line to here instead of here, for example? And if the board gives direction, I like that better, that makes sense, that keeps that community intact, please revise this map, then the demographer will go ahead and do that and just post it on the website again.
And so at that meeting on the 22nd, if the board and the community is there and someone says, could we see what that area would look like in population and in demographic groups if you moved the line to include Newbury Park High School or Reno Road or Wendy, would you be able to do that right then in the meeting, and we would be able to see what that would do to the group, or does this take a lot of keystroking and fooling around?
So it does take a little keystroking and fooling around with it. We also need the appropriate software to display it here in the board. It does take a very advanced computer because of the large data sets. So maybe if we can talk or work something out, maybe we can provide a laptop, but I'm not too sure how that would look like.
So before we move on to other questions that we might ask, is there a sense amongst the board about the process going forward on the 22nd? Would you like to have the 2 to 5 static maps and discuss what we do and don't like about it, and not have any ability to do any tweaking, or would you like staff to explore that possibility of having something that we could interact with on the 22nd? Are you interested in going down that road if it's possible or not?
I would prefer the prior, just coming and letting them present something to it. I would prefer the prior, the first recommendation you said, letting them come and start just using this calendar and having that be the first public hearing.
Okay, other thoughts?
Dr. Connolly, I'm going to ask two things. I thought that I have seen it done where, and it might be your answer where you said the right software or the right computer, where you just move a line 1/8 of an inch and it says, okay, we're going to put these 16,000 in this district instead of that one, and it's done like instantaneous.
Yes.
Is that, you can't do that because of software? Is that what we're saying?
We can move the line very easily, and it'll calculate everything for you. But the process for the calculation, I'm not sure how it would display, because we have not done it in such a public space before. Because we have our own private computers where the software and our hardware is a lot faster.
Okay. And Dr. Connolly, in the next item on the agenda, I'm going to ask about changing the calendars. And I'm wondering about whether that's going to affect whether we come back on the 22nd or...
Well, first of all, we're not speaking to that issue right now, so you need to confine your remarks to what's on the agenda right now. And but whenever that next meeting is, the question that's being asked is what instructions can we give as to what would make the most useful meeting going forward? Any thoughts, Mrs. Fitzgerald?
I had a question. So theoretically, if on the January 22nd meeting you present us with 3 different maps, and then you have community members that have questions about, if you move the line this way, what does that mean for population numbers and representation if you move it that way? What happens then? If you don't have the software here and everything, you're going to take it back and present those options or answers to those questions at the second meeting?
We would take board direction if it was something the board was interested in having looked at, and then if it was able to work, the board could direct to have those maps released on the website as well. One quick scheduling note while we're on this slide. Election Code 10010 has a very, very tight 90-day window where the district has to complete this process from when it started the transition on November 20th. So February 20th is the last day, or around that week, because February 20th is the last day the district can adopt a map and still be safe from litigation in this 90-day window. I just wanted to put that out there as why this happened so quickly and also why it's happening and ending at exactly the point that it is.
Mrs. Everett.
Can we move on to just regular comments, or are we still commenting about your consensus?
No, you can move on to any comments you want.
Okay, so I had a couple of things. So when you draw up the map, and you may have just, I missed one board meeting, when the initial board meeting when we started talking about this. When the maps are drawn up, if there are two trustees in an area, how does that affect the next election?
Essentially, all trustees serve out their remainder of their full 4-year terms. No matter how the maps are drawn, it's not, oh, you're drawn in the same area as someone else, so one of you is out. At the expiration of one's term, for example, if there are two trustees who were just elected, 2022 term expirations, and their next door neighbors, they're probably going to be in the same area. They both serve on the board until 2022, at which time they both can't win re-election in 2022. There could also be a challenger unless someone moves to a new trustee area. At the same time, if there are two trustees who live in the same area, one whose term expires in 2020 and one whose term expires in 2022, at the end of the 2020 term, that trustee area would not be open for election because someone else will be filling that seat until 2022. So in theory, a trustee whose term expires in 2020 potentially may not be able to run again until 2022.
Okay, and then as a follow-up, so what happens if there is no trustee living in one of the 5 areas?
Another aspect of this transition process is the district is required to consider election sequencing. So for example, if there are 3 trustees in their own area and then 2 paired together, there's obviously going to be one that's open. And so our recommendation would be is when you're sequencing the next election where there'll be 2 seats up for election, one of those should be from the vacant trustee area. And the next one we would recommend likely the one with the highest minority population by citizen voting age.
Okay. Now, you just mentioned that if a trustee moves, so if the boundaries are drawn up and 2 trustees are in the same area, can a trustee then move to one of the other areas before the next election?
For the 5 of you, yes, because you were all elected at large. However, starting in 2020, once a trustee is elected from a particular trustee area, they must continue to reside within that trustee area. If a trustee is elected from Area 3, which is a made-up area not on any map yet, and then they decide to move to Area 1, that's equivalent to moving out of the district as if you were a trustee now. So you're out of your area, so you would forfeit your board seat in that scenario.
Okay, so if a trustee isn't up until for 4 years, but they wanted to be in an area that was up in 2 years, the trustee that currently resides there is up in 2 years, then that trustee would have to run against the one that's up in 2 years in the new area?
Can you clarify your question?
Okay.
I just want to make sure I got it.
So if a trustee doesn't want to be in their area because there's another trustee there and they don't want to run against that person, but they do want to run against a different person, so they could move to that person's area and run against them and not forfeit their seat when they move out of their area?
The current board, as is, serves out the remainder of your term no matter where in the district you live. Upon your term expiration, if your trustee area, for example, is one that has somebody who is also up for election in 2022, and if another candidate was expiring in 2020, the 2020 candidate could move to an open area because another 2022 area wouldn't be open for election yet. But in theory, moving forwards, yes, someone could move because you're all at large. Once a trustee is elected from a particular area, they need to remain in that area during the full length of their term.
Okay, but I know that this is, but if...
I don't think anyone's going to sell their house and move.
No, but I'm saying if a trustee moved into another trustee's area that was up for reelection, could that trustee that was up for reelection not run because the other trustee who wasn't up for reelection because they got elected at large moved into their area?
I see what
Is
you're
that
saying.
better?
Once the map is ultimately decided on, so too will the election sequencing. And so it's not that, Trustee Jones or Trustee Smith's area is up for election. It's area 2 is up for election. And so ultimately it doesn't matter at that point who else is in that area. It's been designated for 2020 or for 2022.
Okay, so there will be new designations for what years each area is up for reelection.
And sometimes that happens naturally. For example, if all 5 of you, if a map was drawn and all 5 are in different areas, then obviously the areas with the candidates whose terms expire in 2020 would be the 2 areas that be up for election next. Again, similarly, if there are 2 paired together, there's an open area, that one should be next as well. So it's just going to depend on how the maps look, of what the sequencing should be, whether it's natural or board decision of what comes next.
Okay, that's all very interesting. Thank you.
These questions about area trustees causes me to recall that in looking at other districts' websites in preparation for this, I noticed that there was a district that was sort of celebrating or touting that one of their area splitting victories was that they were able to create 5 areas where the sitting trustees each lived in a different area. And that kind of now makes me think about whether the current location of the trustees, which is a matter of public record since we have to file our addresses when we run for public office, whether the current locations of trustees are considered. In other words, will those things be placed on the maps that you provide to us in January, the location of each trustee?
Oftentimes on a draft map, trustees' residence will be designated by a star. It's not going to show your exact location on a street, but there'll be a star on a map to show folks. That's something the board can direct to have on the map or not have on the map. Incumbency can be a consideration, but it cannot be the sole consideration in why a particular map was drawn. And it also obviously can't be gerrymandered to create a path that doesn't seem natural and doesn't work with the district's community. Similarly, there are other considerations the board can look at. For example, sometimes folks want to keep the same school attendance area in one trustee area. Other times boards try to divide up their attendance areas so that multiple trustees will have some constituents who attend a particular school versus just this is my trustee area. So that's another thing that the board can direct to try to do in creating these maps as well.
So I would like to increase the likelihood that as many of the maps that are provided to us in January as possible are viable choices rather than thrown away or rejected out of hand. It seems to me that if you're going to make 3 to 5 maps, we ought to increase the odds that the maps are good ones. And I'm guessing that it would be helpful for you to know what the board's inclination in this area is. You've heard from the public. You're not going to get any more public input before you reappear in January. Is it helpful for you to know from board members whether they have preferences, or are you just going to assume that we want to see a map that keeps clusters intact and want to see a map that doesn't keep clusters intact? How can we help make the maps as useful as possible?
You can give that direction now. You can ask for different looks, a map that keeps attendance areas as tightly as compact as possible versus a map that spreads across multiple trustees, boundaries spreading through attendance areas, for example, of the high schools. You can provide that feedback now. Every map option that's presented to the district will be a viable option. It's just going to come down to taste amongst the community, and obviously ultimately it's the board's decision.
So I will jump in and say that I think because of the geography of our community, having areas that include a Newbury Parkish area, a Thousand Oaks, Maine area, and a Westlake area is almost certainly where we're going to end up. It would be an extraordinary map that could slice up the 3 cluster areas into 5 equal sections and have them have any community integrity. So my inclination is to respect the clusters in some way or another. And if there are other board members who think that it might be possible to create stripes out of the town that ran from Newbury Park to Westlake, this would be a good time to suggest that that's something that you think our community might like to see, or maybe you just might be curious to see how hard it is to pull something like that off.
Well, and I just want to add, it may not be possible to have a trustee represent every single, someone who lives in every single school area, but there could be direction of, I want, trustee areas to span, at least 2 high schools be part of, 2 high school attendance areas be included in a particular trustee area each. That could be direction. So where it may not be able to make a band across the entire district, you might be able to connect 2, for example.
Mrs. Everett?
And to that point, so it's my understanding that Hidden Valley, which is, where I mean when I say Hidden Valley, right? It's the one down there at the bottom right.
Where Potrero Road is,
Yeah.
that part that had the very small population.
Yeah, so it's kind of a little bit rural. So some of that goes to Newbury Park, and I believe the part over by Westlake, closer to Westlake, goes to Westlake. I think that wherever you can do that, I know that you're not maybe going to get everyone that goes to Westlake High School in one trustee area or every household. Also, it's important to note that there is a part of Thousand Oaks that some kids will go to Westlake and some kids will go to Thousand Oaks, and I'm not sure where the boundaries are of that, but then you're going to get a big mix, and so if there's boundaries drawn somewhere around in there, but then you've got where you pointed out was the heavily populated Latino area, which is right kind of in the middle of that, downtown, so it's kind of downtown off of Thousand Oaks Boulevard, where Conejo Elementary is. Not that one, but the one down below it, yes. And so that, I think they go to Kalina, but there also are kids that live probably right in that area that go to both Thousand Oaks and Westlake. So I think that's helpful to understand that, as far as there are, and also kids can transfer in and out. They can go to any of the 3 high schools if they want to. They can ask to do that. But I think that there are a lot more that do between the Westlake and the Thousand Oaks schools. So, but I do believe that that more rural area is, if I'm correct, I call it that because it's got horses and all that kind of stuff, but it's right here in the city. But that part is, some of it goes to Newbury Park, and the part over closest, that would be Hidden Valley, goes to Westlake.
Okay. Thank you.
And do you have the maps for all the attendance areas?
Not on this particular chart. I know that it's available on the
But you
website.
have them for your purposes? Okay.
Any other things that board members feel that the team should know in preparation for? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Feldman, can you go up to the computer and go to our district website just so I can once again point out to the community where the adjustments were made on how to get to really our database, a very comprehensive website of all the information we've been talking about. So in the middle of our homepage, if you scroll down right to the middle, just scroll down, keep going down, right there. You'll see by trustee area election system. If you click on that, you'll see all the information that I think is very comprehensive for a website. I'm hoping our attorneys, when we're done with this, will tell us that we have the most comprehensive website with all the information on it. I think we're working on it, so anybody in the state, but it's real easy to find. And I think we continue to load information on there every day for the community to really have access to and ask questions as well. Submit questions or concerns at the bottom of that as well, and it's also in Spanish. So please take advantage of that. Thanks.
Thank you
Ms.
very
Feldman.
much.